The following is for informational purposes only. For medical advice, please see a medical professional.
Welcome to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. Today we're going to talk about micronutrients. In the past, we've talked about the macronutrients, which again are the carbs, protein, and fat. And this episode, we're talking about the micronutrients and the importance of these in the foods that we eat on a regular basis. So Susy, take it away. What are the micronutrients?
Well, micronutrients are the vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients or phytochemicals that are in food. And they are the ones that do not necessarily give your body energy like carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, but they help facilitate the usage of energy in the body. So they have all kinds of functions, and we'll go into that. So vitamins, there's water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C and the B vitamins, and there's fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. There's also minerals, and then there's phytonutrients that are really kind of an exciting thing that I like to talk about. And so we'll be talking about that.
Oh, that's great.
So all our lives, we've been told to eat fruits and vegetables, take your vitamins. We know that this is important, but how can we get these into our regular diet? You know, back when I was a kid, it was always the one a day, take your one a day.
Yeah.
I don't even remember taking vitamins as a kid, though. So,
and they added a lot of things to the bread. I won't name the brand.
Oh yeah,
that white
bread.
They fortified everything.
Well, there were reasons for fortification, right. But yeah,
but times have changed.
Yeah,
and so
they still fortified things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So basically, you're going to cover what can we get from the food that we eat to perhaps get everything we need that way or not. And so we're going to break that down. So you're going to start with vitamins and tell us.
Yeah. So why do they matter? So vitamins assist with the maintenance of your body, bone health, nerve function, and overall well-being. They're necessary for many bodily functions. They do not directly provide energy, but they assist with energy-producing macronutrients. So a lot of vitamins were discovered because of deficiencies that people had throughout history, especially in the Western world and even sometimes the Eastern world. We had scurvy, which was a big deal back in the seafaring times of navies. People didn't realize that you needed vitamin C for the prevention of scurvy. And scurvy is a pretty serious thing. You lose your teeth. It's horrible. Beriberi and pellagra were both discovered to be solved by a vitamin B deficiency.
You're telling us that it's the carbs, protein, and fat that provide the energy, but there's something about vitamins and minerals and such that help deliver the macronutrients.
Sure, right. You need those in order to make it all work. Yeah.
To make it all work, yeah.
Macro minerals are inorganic elements required for larger quantities by plants and animals for building blocks and regulating functions. So when I say there are two types, basically macro minerals and micro minerals. The macro minerals are ones you need in a larger quantity, at least 100 milligrams a day.
Okay, so macro mineral means needed in a larger quantity, and it may or may not be the essential.
Right. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sodium, potassium, chloride, and sulfur are all macro minerals. So, for instance, calcium, you need about 1,200 milligrams for women. It's about 300 at each serving. Microminerals are inorganic elements needed for smaller amounts, but are equally important for enzyme activity, metabolic processes, and other vital functions. So microminerals are also called trace minerals, and they're needed in much smaller amounts. So instead of milligrams, micrograms. So iron, zinc, copper, iodine, selenium, and manganese are common ones. Iron is one that gets a lot of attention because it is related to anemia, but they're all important. Minerals stand out for people of all ages, but we'll talk in a minute about why they're important for people as they age.
I can see why some people would say, oh, I'm just going to take a supplement because we'll say like
Hmm.
vitamin C, I know I can get that from citrus fruit. But with all these minerals, it's easy to feel like my mind is boggled with how am I going to make sure I keep track of
Yeah,
all this?
okay.
I'm not a scientist like Susie. And so tell us about how a balanced diet can help us with
Well, a
what we
balanced
need.
diet can really help with that because some of those minerals are pretty widespread in food.
Okay.
It's like phosphorus, selenium, manganese, even magnesium are pretty widespread in a lot of foods.
Like what?
Well, magnesium is pretty high in nuts and
Oh,
grains.
okay.
Selenium's in a lot of oils. Same with manganese is in a lot of fruits and vegetables. So they're just widespread in foods. So we don't have to worry as much about some of those. They're all crucial for overall health, and a balanced diet that provides an adequate supply of nutrients is essential for optimal growth and development. So deficiencies can cause a variety of health problems.
Now, what if
So,
somebody just eats sort of like what I call like fast food nation kind of food? Like, I mean,
yeah, that can
I
be
know
a
people that
problem.
don't really eat nuts and grains
Hmm.
unless it's found in the type of hamburger bun they're eating or something. I mean, is
Yeah, it's kind of amazing sometimes. I have friends that had kids that were such picky eaters. They didn't even know how they survived childhood,
mm,
but fortunately it is pretty widespread and also in a lot of foods they do fortify. Like I'm thinking of cereals for children are fortified a lot of times with iron. Iron fortified cereal is
oh
super
that
common.
oh that's true.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that. Iron is a little harder for kids to get, especially when they're young, because a lot of kids don't like meat that much. It's just not as easy for them to get the iron. It's very common for children to be anemic, and it's also common for women to be anemic because they're
Of a certain age.
menstruating.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and not as common for elderly people, although it can be an indication of a bleeding disorder that you might not even know that you have
Right.
anemia. So it's important. So should we supplement? I personally
Yeah.
cannot subscribe minerals or vitamins. I always think that it's important to talk to your medical professional. They always, when I go to the doctor, and I have 4 different doctors that I go to, they always ask me what supplements I'm taking. Because remember, supplements, even though they're not drugs, can impact the other things that you're taking and can have side effects. So the doctors always want to know what supplements that you're taking.
Yeah. And can
Um,
I add some couple things on that?
sure, sure.
The best way a doctor can find out about this is by having an annual blood test. And a lot of times when you're a young adult, you have to be much more proactive about getting your annual blood test than us senior citizens. And I had an example of that where I hadn't had a blood test. I don't even know how long when I was in my, say, I think about mid 40s, and I went to the doctor complaining of fatigue, and it turned out that my vitamin D level, and I'd been living in California at that point for 15 years, my vitamin D level it was so low. Like they knew that even just taking an over the counter supplement wasn't going to do it. I had to
Hmm.
be prescribed a
Yeah, prescription
huge
dose. Yeah,
mega dose.
yeah,
And I had
yeah,
to take that, gosh, I want to say it was up to a year before I could switch over to, drugstore over the counter D. It took a
yeah,
lot to turn it around. And I've
yeah.
had to take a supplement ever since. And so don't think, oh, this is something I don't need to worry about till I'm a senior citizen because
Right,
yeah,
right.
get your
It's
blood
very
drawn.
common, very common. I live in the northern climates, and it's very common for people to be low in vitamin D. And
Children too?
yes, and it's
I didn't
it's
know. Yeah.
it's a problem because we in the northern climates it's a problem because of the angle of the sun. So even if you could get vitamin D from the sun, if you were walking around in a bathing suit, because it's a reaction in your skin that makes the vitamin C or vitamin D active, right? Even if you could, it's pretty impossible in northern climates. So it's very, very typical for people in the Northwest to be low on vitamin D. I myself did have to take a prescription dose for a while. I still struggle with my vitamin D. And I do take vitamin D on a regular basis because of that. I think it's really very, very common for people to be low on vitamin D.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of impacts on our health. But
Yeah.
back to supplements, I was going to tell a couple stories about that. But, everyone is unique in their requirements. And you can't just go out and take a giant dose of vitamin D either without having a test first. So
Right.
But because vitamin D being a fat-soluble vitamins, I didn't talk about that, but fat-soluble vitamins can be toxic if taken in too high of a dose. Because they're fat-soluble, they stay stored in the body for longer. Whereas B vitamins, vitamin C, water-soluble vitamins, they exit the body pretty quickly in your urine.
But if you've had your blood test and your vitamin D is really low, that means it's not storing in your body. So that's
right. So that's a different issue, and that can be addressed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The problem too is that there's limited regulation when it comes to vitamins, because the FDA, and the history is that FDA kind of backed off from regulating them. They have what's called good marketing practices, or GMPs.
And not just vitamins, by the way, all supplements. All
right,
supplements,
right. That's right. Not just vitamins, supplements. You're right. Yes, excuse me. This is designed to limit unnecessary ingredients and improper packaging that can lead to contamination. There are some independent regulatory agencies that you can look for on a label. One of them is USP, which stands for U.S. Pharmacopoeia, ConsumerLab.com, and NSF International. But quality can vary dramatically. And it's important to think about that when you're buying supplements. It's tricky. It really is tricky. I once watched a video on NPR where they were doing a special on supplements, and they showed how they made omega-3 fatty acid supplements. And it wasn't something that you really wanted to watch, because any oil-based thing and made in large quantities has a chance to go rancid. So it's better to really, really look at your quality and, get some solid advice about that. Not necessarily, you can not necessarily trust somebody who's trying to sell things over the internet. I mean, I'm just saying, if somebody's trying to sell you something, there's a good chance that they're just trying to make a buck.
I don't know how things are regulated in other countries. Really, I have no idea. And I hope that we have an international audience, but we are talking about the United States is what we know about, and our FDA, which is a whole ball of wax right now in this country, 2025. But that being said, supplements are not a food. They're not a drug. They're not regulated.
Yeah, and there are some problems. Yeah, and some supplements aren't necessarily from the United States. I mean, when you buy a supplement, it's hard to guarantee that it's not from overseas. There's been some problems with supplements. One that comes to mind for me is turmeric. I know turmeric can be a good supplement to take because it's not common in the American diet and it has a lot of nutritional benefits, but it can be contaminated and with lead and other things. So you just have to be really careful when you're buying. And supplements are expensive, let's face it. So I like to think about, how do we get these from the foods that we eat? So there are vitamins and minerals that become more of a concern as we age.
And can I say one thing about that? Like, find out what your parents' family history is, because if I, for instance, know my father had to take B12 shots, the last 20 years of his life, chances are I've got to watch that for myself,
Right. A lot of people, though, like I'm thinking about my parents, they never had a vitamin test. But my daughter, has some history because I have had tests for these things. Now, here's some vitamins of concern. So the first one, like we were just talking about, is B12. B12 is essential for healthy nerve and brain function, red cell production, and DNA synthesis. Unfortunately, B12 is a vitamin that really declines with your age because there is the absorption factors change. You need something called the intrinsic factor in your gut in order to absorb B12. And that's based on enzymatic activity, which lessens as you age.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it's really common for people to be low in B12. My husband was acting kind of spacey, and he went to the doctor and they did a B12 test. His was really low, and he did shots for a while, and it really, really helped. In order to get B12, it doesn't matter. Like if you need a supplement, if your B12's low, eating foods high in B12 doesn't necessarily help. You need a big help with that. You need a supplement.
Well, that's good news for people who are vegans.
Right.
Yeah.
Because B12 is mostly only found in animal foods. I think there's one exception, might be with a tempeh or some kind of fermented soy product, but it's pretty unlikely to get B12 from any food unless you eat meat, fish, eggs, or dairy products.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's an important one. We always have our B12 checked when we go to the doctor.
Okay.
Vitamin D, again, really important. It's crucial for calcium absorption, for bone health, and also has a lot to do with brain stuff. So it's really important that you know what your vitamin D levels are. Supplementation is common because of that. And I'm not going to tell somebody how much to take or anything, but I think it is a commonly supplemented thing. Calcium, a mineral that is commonly a problem as we age because it's essential for building and maintaining strong bones. So absorption of calcium declines as you age, and oftentimes older adults eat less calcium in their diets. Supplementation and a diet rich in calcium foods like dairy products and leafy greens is important. Calcium is a tricky one because some of the foods that are not dairy-based that contain calcium also have things in them called phytic acid or oxalic acid, which make calcium not as absorbable. So it becomes kind of tricky. I know that medical professionals have kind of backed off from telling people to take mass doses of calcium supplements, and I think the jury is still out on that. I'm seeing in all the research recently mixed reviews. Sometimes they'll say, take your calcium supplements. Sometimes they don't want people to, because calcium can also be accumulative in other parts of your body, like your arteries and stuff. So the jury's still out on that.
We are going to do another episode on bone. So Susie's going to go into this much more detail. And this is an area for sure. Talk to your doctor about. I, for instance, do take calcium and will be for the rest of my life. And that has to do with the fact that I've had radiation on my jaw. And if I don't, there's very strong research. If I don't take it the rest of my life, my jaw can start disintegrating as I age. And so I am all for it. And I'll tell you, I got the best teeth I know in my 70s. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I've had radiation too. And also I'm a very small boned person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at risk for osteoporosis. So I don't supplement all the time with calcium, but I try to be mindful of how much calcium I'm eating. My naturopath also told me to eat foods that are high in boron for my bones, which is prunes. So that was interesting. You're talking to your doctor. You're talking to your oncologist, your naturopath, your primary care physician. Talk to them and get information. I think it's really important.
Great. With the supplements, because as senior citizens, some of us are taking like blood pressure medicines and things that affect our electrolytes and our fluid
Yes.
balance.
Yes.
And here we're getting into an area where you definitely want to
Yes.
meet with your doctor. To
Especially if you're taking any
decide.
kind of prescription medication, potassium can be a concern. So,
Yeah.
either you're on a potassium sparing drug or a so it's complicated.
Yeah.
That's very true.
And when your doctor asks you, what do you take? Be sure and
Be sure to
include
tell 'em.
every supplement you take, because
Yes.
it
Yeah.
may interact with some prescription drug.
Right. So, what are some common tests that you can do to help assess your needs? We talked about vitamin D. You can get a blood test for that. Sometimes insurance doesn't pay for it where I live, unfortunately, but it's a good test to have. Iron is a common thing when you get your blood work done. A CBC usually, or that complete blood count, usually includes iron. It's not a bad idea to ask your doctor to do a B12 test. And my doctor just routinely does it now. You can also have a full blood panel done to check for broad deficiencies. I mean, if you're really worried about malnutrition, when I was working in a Head Start program, we had a parent who wanted their child to be a raw vegan. And, she had all the best intentions in mind. But we recommended that you get the child a blood test to see if the child was getting the nutrients that they needed. And sure enough, they weren't. And the parent had to look at changes in the child's diet. So it's important. You can get that done, but it's not commonly done unless someone's really worried about malnutrition.
I think that's where we're going to stop. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening. And until next time, we are staying alive.
You've been listening to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. This show is hosted by Margaret Cooley and Susy Hymas. To subscribe to our show, leave a comment or ask a question, please visit stayingalivewithmargaretandsusy.com. Our podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. If you've enjoyed our program, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.